Jonathan, welcome to CGTN.
Pleasure.
I've been reading your magazines a lot.
Thank you. We need that.
All right, but one of the things you've been talking about is what to do with some of the solutions we used to believe in to solve our world problems, but now it's a question mark. For example, about leadership.
Right.
The United States, President Trump is going to come. So, what is your expectation?
You know, it's very interesting, and nobody knows which Trump will arrive. Because, of course, there are multiple Trumps. There's the Trump who occasionally reads from the talking points and the teleprompters and does what his aides try and get him to do. And then there's the Trump of the Twitter world who fires off in all directions and also often undermines his own policies. The fact that he's coming, that in and of itself is fascinating, and there are all kinds of theories about why that is. But Trump feels like he's riding high right now. He's just, got tax reform passed, and then he just ended the government shutdown. More than that, Davos gives him access to a crowd that he's never been able to participate in before. When he was a businessman, he never got to come to a place like this. And the thing to remember is the first priority for Trump is always ego, ego, ego. And that's what I think he'll find most gratifying about being here.
This is almost the answer that I expected from you. But, people have been saying whether the U.S. media is having this inert, eternal love affair or fight against Trump all at the same time. And as a result of that, you have not necessarily have a very clear assessment of his presidency. Look at the achievements, what he has achieved so far, and look at his possible agendas that will have an impact on your country.
There have been a few achievements, if you can call them that, like the tax plan. Remember, most of the things he's tried to get through Congress have failed, whether it's health care or what have you. And the reason he's so hard to interpret, of course, is because he's constantly contradicting himself, whether it's on matters involving the Russia investigation or his firing of James Comey, or what his actual policies are. He said he was against NATO, or implied he was against NATO's Common Defense Charter, and then he was in favor of it, and he's constantly flip-flopping.
So what does that mean for your job? You're constantly writing stories, trying to get the best information to your audience, so what does it mean to you?
It's very hard because the constant pace of discourse, of course changes, of scandals, makes it impossible to remember, or hard enough to remember what happened yesterday, let alone what happened several months ago. And by constantly changing the subject the way he is, it makes it very hard for us to pay attention to what's really going on. So that's the challenge for us in the American media and for an analytic magazine like Foreign Policy, is to cut through the noise and pay attention to what's actually happening on the ground.
But many of our colleagues probably just love this because they make a lot of drama. The ratings high, and the paper sell, magazine alive.
Trump, there's no question Trump has been the best thing to happen to the American media, despite the fact that he's condemning us all the time in decades.
What is exactly the leadership style you think he has, if you could use leadership style, this word?
Oh, yeah, because I would put that in quotation marks, since it's not clear that he has a deliberate style. He likes to think of himself, of course, as a CEO who rules the country like he ruled his own business. But I think the term that most accurately describes him is the chaos president, because he's constantly firing off in different directions, and as we were saying, making it so hard to understand what his actual objectives are.
We saw him at the UN Council, when UN is having its annual meeting. We saw him also in APEC in Da Nang earlier, rather late last year. And we are going to see him here at the World Economic Forum. Many of these occasions are actually multilateral.
Sure.
It is about part of the globalization. So what do you make of his presence one after another at these occasions? Is he, in rhetoric, still stick to what he promised, but actually, in reality, has been together with his administration moving in a very different direction?
Well, certainly if you look at policy, you'll see that not that much has changed internationally since Trump became president. It's not like we've withdrawn from any major multilateral bodies. Of course, he didn't move forward with TPP, but beyond that, there haven't been enormous changes.
But UNESCO, for example.
UNESCO as well, but that's always been a difficult relationship for the United States. You have his advisors on the one hand telling him that it's very important for him to come, and occasionally he does.
Yeah.
And then again, there's the idea of Trump personally getting access to elites that he's never been exposed to before. And I think on a personal level, that's enormously appealing to him.
Yes. Having said that, though, there are a lot of different ways of leadership these days. You see President Trump, he has a very unique style, to say the least. You also see Europe struggling, but at the same time trying to seek a common goal, and probably even have this spiritual leadership in a way for the rest of the world. That's what Europe believes. And in Asia, you see China as a rising emerging economy, together with other of the BRICS countries, trying to make a point. So how do you see these different ways of trying to lead and cooperate? What does that mean?
What's happening, I think, is the whole world is figuring out how to respond to Trump. So the fear is that the United States will withdraw from its traditional role as the supporter, the foundation of all of these international institutions that it helped create after World War II. And so what leaders from Angela Merkel to Justin Trudeau in the West, and Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi, who spoke at the beginning of this year's forum, are all trying to say in their own different ways is if the United States will not play the role of global leader anymore, we are willing to take on at least parts of that role.
But is that likely to happen according to you? I mean, you're a very seasoned journalist and been writing on the international issue. Is it possible, given the nature of politics?
Certainly not in the near term, and that's because no country, I think, has the ability to convene as many states, and no country has the soft power of the United States, the hard power of the United States, the tradition of the United States, which makes it a trusted leader. Not perhaps at the moment under this administration, but historically, no other country has that deep foundation of trust and admiration and respect and fear, all these things that make the United States in a unique position to lead.